I don't know if a lot of people know this, Sean, but let's face the facts. There are a lot of men that don't open up and kind of get stuff off their chest, so to speak, in order to not only help others, but to help themselves. Because what I discovered is that by sharing my story, it's helped a lot of people immensely, but it's helped me just as much, if not more. And I can't really explain the ins and outs of all of that. I just know it does something for me. You know, it just helps me become stronger as a man and as a father and as a survivor.
Hey, what's up, people? This is Sean Dustin, the host of the show. Today is Sunday, March 22nd. It's about 4:45 in the morning. I woke up around 3:30 this morning and couldn't sleep, so I decided to edit this episode. This is number 23. In this episode, I talked to Joe Potosi, and he is a author of a book titled When the Dust Settled. And our conversation was about his story and, early to adolescent child abuse from his mother and stepfather. It was a good story, a good chat, good interview. Joe's a strong individual, a fighter, and he showed it. And he explained to me a little bit about himself, his story, his life, and I think you're going to enjoy what the conversation that we had. On another note, this is probably the second or third day of the mandatory shelter in place for California. These are strange times. That's the only really way I can explain it. I've never experienced anything like this before in my lifetime, and I'm sure there are plenty more of you out there that are in the same boat. We're all in unfamiliar territory right now. But the most important thing is don't panic. This will pass at some point. This isn't going to be the new norm, and just believe that. I'm a guy that subscribes to conspiracies, and I go down rabbit holes quite deep on some subjects. But even with this, I'm like, what if it isn't bullshit? What if it is serious? And and I don't take it seriously, and I myself get infected and pass that on to some other folks like my mother, or if I happen to see her, or she's in her 70s, or my dad, how would I feel if I was responsible for that? And I'm just erring on the side of caution, irregardless of what my thoughts on how it really got started, and what the if it was man-made, what were the what were the reasons, but I'm just kind of like trying to put all that to the side and just practice a little bit of conformity, even though I hate conforming to anything. But if this is legit, how much of an ass would I feel like if I didn't take it seriously and listen to all the different warnings that are out there? Hand washing, social distancing, and all of that. So like I said, I'm erring on the side of caution. I only travel to one place, and that's my, to go pick up my daughter and then right back. Plenty of hand sanitizer, and all of that. So just don't panic. Try and plan. I mean, if you're going to, need groceries or something, don't wait until you're out. You're going to have to probably plan it, Go about 4 days or 3 days before you're out of something. That way, if it's too crowded, you still have another, all right, well, let me try it at this time of the morning or, afternoon or whenever it is. That's kind of what I've been doing. And it's working out. I also have a couple of more episodes to release after this one. Yesterday I was kind of bored and I just thought, hey, with this social distancing, why don't I, and I'm always thinking that, something's a conspiracy or, this was done, the media is just, blowing this up. And so, well, why don't I try and reach out to some people, in the podcasting community and see if anybody wanted to do a 4 to 6 person, like Zoom check-in, Zoom conference check-in and turn it into an episode. And I was successful. I got 3 people on the first attempt, so there's an hour there, and then I had 4 people on the second attempt, and there's about an hour and a half there. And it's basically just checking in, hey, where are you from? What's your name? What's your situation in the city that you're in? Do you know anybody that's infected? And it was pretty cool, man. And it was a cool way to just reach out to other folks and we were all able to kind of, put politics aside and other things aside and just, kind of tell each other how we're feeling, what our fears were, what is this going to turn into? And on the second one, I actually got to talk to a guy up in Canada who's part of, not special operations, but like a security, type of, situation or a job. And, he actually, was there on the front lines of the fight, up in Canada. So he explained some stuff and was kind of, let us know that, hey, this is real. I know some people that have gotten this and do have this right now. And, it's not, take it serious because it is serious. So that was cool. I mean, it kind of helped put it in perspective because if you don't know anybody and all you're hearing is the media, it's hard to digest and take something seriously that you can't see. That's why I had such an issue with religion because you're wanting me to accept this authority that I can't see, and I just never bought into it. And so it was good to see that. Not good to see, but I mean it was good that I was able to confirm with, somebody out there, which was the whole point. I wanted to, go find for myself, the answer I was looking for. And it was pretty cool. And I'm probably going to try it out again, maybe this evening or tomorrow evening, but it's definitely a good way to get some socialization, talk to other people around the country and other countries. And just kind of help each other get through this. We're all in unfamiliar territory, and the best possible thing that we can do is lean on each other right now, through social media, your friends, use FaceTime or any of the other platforms like Zoom or Skype and get a group together and just kind of talk to each other. And, that kind of helps, settle fears and anxieties and just helps us relate to one another. And in a time when we've been so divided through social media, let's try and use it for a good cause and to, if you want to say, help each other, get closer. We're all in this together. Irregardless of how many continents there are, in this, world and how many different lands that there are, we are all human, and this is about humanity and it's not about tribal. I know that's how, we were in the past, but I think, we should all be coming together for a common cause right now. And, helping people is not a bad thing, especially those that need it. And so that's what I'm trying to do, right now, is just do my part. I have a platform and it's not like I reach a whole lot of people, but if you're out there listening, I definitely appreciate it. Well, that's enough of me. So anyways, let's get to this episode. And like I said, I got a couple more coming out. So be safe. Wash your hands. Practice social distancing. Don't be a spreader. It's not, nobody wants to have that on their hands. So let's get to the show. This is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast, and I'm your host, Sean Dustin. Today I'm here talking with Joe Potosi, and he is the author of a book titled When the Dust Settled. And his book is about his journey as a child through adolescence, dealing with child abuse from his mother and stepfather, and also abandonment issues from his biological father. So I'd like to introduce him now. Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing very good. Thank you so much, Sean, for this opportunity. It's much appreciated.
Not a problem, man. Not a problem. We met. I think I may have run across your Facebook Live deal talking about your book and your situation. I think it was something on Facebook that I was watching that kind of piqued my interest, and then I reached out to you and then asked, hey, maybe you'd want to be a guest on my podcast.
Yes, I believe that is how it all kind of went down. And people may ask, why do I even bother doing the podcast or, radio or TV, newspapers? Why do I even share my story? It's because I want to help people. And I don't know if a lot of people know this, Sean, but let's face the facts. There are a lot of men that don't open up and kind of get stuff off their chest, so to speak, in order to not only help others, but to help themselves. Because what I discovered is that by sharing my story, it's helped a lot of people immensely, but it's helped me just as much, if not more. And I can't really explain the ins and outs of all of that. I just know it does something for me. It just helps me become stronger as a man and as a father and as a survivor.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. There is a saying in the 12-step program that you can't keep what you have unless you give it away. And so by helping other people, and I feel the same way, that you're telling your truth and you're helping to cleanse your own soul and your own spirit, if you want to call it that, but you're helping to cleanse yourself of the things in your past, and you're also allowing other people to listen to your story and maybe relate, and maybe they're going through the same thing, and they realize that, hey man, I'm not alone. Maybe I should, I can talk to somebody about it as well.
Absolutely, Sean. That's exactly the thought I just had. You're not alone. Although we feel alone, we feel like we've been abandoned, literally, figuratively, or whatever the case is. And so therefore, we don't put ourselves out there and seek that help. There's a stigma. Why would I go to counseling? Why would I, get put on depression medicine? Real men don't do these types of things. And that's such a misconception, right? And You discover by, going to seek help or talking to like a small group of people you trust, that it's extremely therapeutic and it can really help you.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that perception, Matt, what it is to be a man, I don't know, you're in the Midwest. I come from California, which is a little bit more progressive, and I'm from the Bay Area. So, I guess I was raised in a more melting pot kind of situation, but I mean, my father was a cop, and he's kind of hard line, tough love kind of guy, and guys don't cry, this that, and it's really not the most it's not the most accurate way of becoming a productive individual, as far as like understanding emotions and having emotional intelligence and being able to identify problems that you have with yourself and how to kind of mitigate that or dissect it and just kind of figure out, well, why do I do these things? Did it come from, this? Did it come from that? And once you identify them, okay, well, how do I change them? Because if you're the same person you were a year ago, you're not doing it right.
Right.
Because nobody's perfect. We all kind of grew up in with sort of a screwed up situation, unless you were a trust fund kid and grew up as a rich kid. But even they got their own issues. So
Yep.
Nobody's perfect. We're all here trying to just be better people than we were yesterday. And if you're not, then you're just a shithead.
You said something very key, Sean, that I want to really start off my talk with. And that you said, if you're now different a year from now, or let's say 5 years or 10 years, 10 years from now, you're still struggling with the things you were struggling with 10 years prior. You're not progressing. That's why I say this. This is what I want to say. Your condition does not have to be your conclusion. So in my case, being a survivor of traumatic, long, severe child abuse, statistics say I'm going to be that person when I become a father. I'm going to be, I'm going to be just like them. It's called learned behavior. I'm going to be, a waste of space or whatever. I made a conscious decision that my condition, what I had experienced and what I went through, which includes PTSD, anxiety, depression, that all was brought on by what I suffered as a child, does not define me. It's like if I had cancer, the cancer does not define who I am. I refuse to let my past and how it affected me even as an adult control my life. I made a choice to make changes, and I want to get to that. But before I do, you mentioned California. I was in the Navy. I was stationed in San Diego. However, I didn't get to spend much time in San Diego, but when I did, I loved the beach, of course. And we made a trip to San Francisco. I had an uncle that lived there, so it was nice to be able to live at his place for 2 weeks instead of living on a ship. And I have to admit, I lived in San Diego, I lived in LA, I lived in Philadelphia, I lived in Memphis. San Francisco is different. It's a lot different than any big city I ever lived in, I'm not saying it's bad or it's good. I'm just saying it's different. It's exciting. This was years ago, but I got to experience Chinese New Year parade and all that. It's really cool. Anyway, if you want me to get started on the story, I could now, or
yeah. No, that's fine. Yeah, tell our listeners that give your story, what you experienced. If you want to go into details, I don't know if you want to do that. As far as the kind of abuse, whether it was mental, physical, sexual. That's up to you what you want to divulge in your message.
Yeah. So I was around the age of 3.5 is my earliest memory. And at that time, I had a sister. She was a year older than myself. My mom was pregnant with my brother, Marty, and my father was with us at this time. And we lived in a really dilapidated apartment. I remember we didn't have very much as far as food or toys, but we had each other. Well, as it turned out, there was a housing projects in the neighborhood that was relatively new that my parents got accepted into. And for us, it was like an improvement. It was like a step up because, you know, most people are trying to hurry, get out of the projects. But for us, it was definitely an upgrade because of our situation at the time. So we moved into these projects, and my mother had just had my brother Greg or Marty, and they both like to drink alcohol. But all these people in the neighborhood started coming around, coming over drinking and, partying all hours of the night. My mom and dad began to argue a lot more and fight from what I can remember. And then one day my dad left. And the day he left, there was this guy named Tyrone that was always at the house playing cards, drinking with my parents. He came to the house later that day through the back door. And eventually this man became my stepfather. Now, in the 70s, let me rephrase this. So, I don't treat people any differently because you're the color of your skin, because you may be from Samoa or you may be from, say, Dominican Republic or Africa. In fact, I work with a lot of students from all over the world at a local university. And I have this value. I treat a person by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. But this is the catch. How can you treat them by their character if you don't give them a chance? I say all that to say this. My stepdad is a black man. Obviously, my mom was a white woman. And in the 70s, a white woman and a black man being together as a couple was really not accepted, especially by my extended family. From Dubuque, Iowa. So I didn't mention before, but I lived in Rockford, Illinois at this time, which is about an hour from Chicago. We lived in the projects. My mom was dating this black man, and eventually she had 2 sons to him. Many people in our extended family shunned us even more because of this fact, the fact that she was with a black guy. But what happened in a really rapid succession was once my dad left, everything, the fact that we had no food, the fact that my mother was being beaten by my stepfather, was me and my sister's fault. Everything was me and my sister's fault. Now, mind you, me and my sister were just young kids, right? And at this stage, my mother had her 4th child, my brother Greg. So there was 4 kids that me and my sister we're fending for our infant brothers. They're only 11 months apart, changing their diapers, feeding them, caring for them. And you say, why? Because my mom was too preoccupied with drinking, getting high, entertaining the neighbors, etc., etc. And whenever things didn't go her way, when she would get intoxicated, she would lash out at me and my sister, in particular me, because, and I'm going to tell you why. My stepdad, and I remember, my stepdad knew my father. As it turned out, I found out years later, he befriended my father to get access to my mother. And in fact, they were having an affair behind my father's back. And when my dad found out, he didn't know how to deal with it. He didn't have the coping skills. Apparently, he left. He didn't leave to a different part of town and, would see us occasionally once a week. He left. He didn't give us a dime over the years. Only time I would see him would be in the summers. I'd be allowed to go to Dubuque, Iowa, where he's from, and I'd go to his parents' house, and somehow, some way, they would get in touch with him, and I would see my dad. Now, you have to remember, my dad was my hero, right? I loved my father. And I love my mother, but my dad he was like the Lone Ranger in my mind. And he was going to come back and he was going to beat up the bad guy, in this case, Tyrone, and he was going to come together and we were going to be a family again. Because from the time he left, I saw my mother beaten physically by my stepdad. He broke a jaw, broke a collarbone, he kicked her face, ripped her face open. But not only that, my stepdad would beat me, and my brother Greg in particular. My mom would work second shift, and his idea, he would lock us in the basement. My stepdad would, until it was time for dinner. Or if he decided to let me and my sister go to the community center, he would let us go for a few hours when we come back, help with the kids, and then, we'd go to bed. Now, you see, my stepdad didn't work. I want to fast forward a little bit. But his idea of entertainment was my stepfather loved to embarrass me in front of his friends. Oftentimes, he was a big boxing fan, and I like boxing. I loved Ali, and I liked Frazier. He would like to humiliate me in front of his friends and my brothers. We're older at this point. Maybe I should get to that story later. But he had a knack for just picking on me. There was a bully in the schoolyard. There's a bully on the block. We know this, right? And the bully I had to deal with was in the four walls in which I lived. That was my bully. And I was terrified to go home every day. Most kids drug their feet going to school. Not me. No. School was my safe place. School was where I knew I wasn't going to get beaten by my mom or my stepdad for no apparent reason. And when I say beaten, I don't mean a few swats on the butt. No. My stepdad had a cord from an iron he would use or a wooden paddle.
You hit the mute.
Sorry about that, buddy. Are we good?
Yep. So you'd use a paddle, or do you use the cord from the iron?
Yes, sir. So, and when I wasn't suffering abuse from him, this is what my mom would like. This is what she liked to do. Now, we're still in the projects, right? She liked to get drunk. This happened at least twice that I can remember. And she would run a bathtub, full of water. And I remember one time it woke me up. There was steam billowing out in the hallway. And I figured she was going to take a bath. So I go in, I can tell she's drunk. And I'm like, Mom, what are you doing? You getting ready to take a bath? Don't slip, She goes, no, you little cocksucker. She goes, and she's dragging, she's taking hits from a cigarette. She goes, no, you little cocksucker. And she grabbed me and threw me in this tub. I mean, the water was so unbearable hot. She was so strong, I couldn't get away from her. And who came and rescued me? My stepdad, believe it or not. And that was the only time he ever did. But anyway, these are the types of things I dealt with. When I was in third grade, though, because my mom, she did work like a dog when she chose to work. And my stepdad didn't work. And we had 6 kids by this point. She has 6 kids. I got my first job at a local restaurant, sweeping their parking lot, $2 every Saturday. And I'll give that money to my mother. And I wanted to make a difference. Because you see, it was ingrained in me by this point, everything was my fault. The reason we don't have any food was my fault. The reason he would beat her into a bloody pulp was my fault. I'm a piece of garbage. I'm worthless just like my father. I'm the scum of the earth. I'm a piece of crap. So I figured if I work and make money, maybe I wouldn't be a piece of crap anymore. Maybe I wouldn't be like my dad, useless and shiftless and, whatever. And so I'd give her the money but nothing changed. And for the last several years at this point, my stepdad said, we're going to move out of the projects. We're going to move out of the projects. Well, eventually that did happen. And we moved. It's kind of funny and ironic. We moved out of the projects into an actual house on the west side of Rockford, Illinois, right behind a different set of projects. So it was, out of the projects, but not really out of the projects, sort of. So we have
you're in Project Light.
right. There's an adage for all of us that have ever lived in the projects. They say you can move out of the projects, but they can't move the projects out of you, which means the idea is the mentality of living in that kind of a lifestyle. But we would joke about it because we never really moved out of the projects, I don't know if that makes sense.
No,
so
we moved
into this house. It was like a walkout ranch. All the boys' bedrooms. Now there's 5 boys. Our bedrooms were downstairs in the basement. There was 2 bedrooms. There was a toilet. That's where the washer and dryer was. There was like a little rec room. We had a little black and white TV. My sister's room was upstairs, right across from my mom and stepdad's. So, a new house. I thought in my mind, I'm going into the 5th grade. A new house, a new beginning. Now, you may say to yourself, or your listeners may say to yourself, how does this kid, only being, just finished 4th grade, think this way or act this way? People don't understand. Me and my sister had to grow up really, really fast, mentally, and we didn't have a childhood. Our childhood consisted of babysitting my mother. She would get drunk. Me and my sister would have to clean her up physically and help her to bed. Not to mention caring for our other brothers. And that was our life, man. So I got a paper route job because, again, my stepdad still does not work. And my mom was working second shift at Eclipse, a local factory. But the pattern stayed the same. We started school. Once all of us boys were home, there was my stepfather would make us do was grab crackers, like saltine crackers, cheese slices, and like water if you want something to drink. And once all of us boys got to the basement, we all got home from school. We were sent to the basement. He locked us in the basement until he saw fit to let us upstairs. Now, you think, okay, what's the point? The point is, oftentimes, 3 to 4 times a week, he would leave the house. My mom would be at work, and he would leave us locked in the basement for hours. And it dawned on me after like the 3rd time of this happening, what if there was a fire or another emergency? We had no way to get out of that basement, right? And the only time he let us up was for dinner. And then we'd take our baths upstairs, get cleaned up, do our chores upstairs, and to the basement we went. And I remember one time I was on the show and they said, did your mother know about all this? Absolutely, she knew about it. She was a participant. Even on the weekends, they locked us in the basement. When we weren't playing outside, and they were in the house drinking and they didn't want to be bothered by us, to the basement we went. And that's where they kept us. And that's how it was. So I got this paper route. And through this paper route, I got a lot of snow shoveling jobs, which means I made a lot of money, right? For a young kid just in 5th grade. And I gave most of the money to my mom, but I would stash money because I wanted to play organized baseball. And I just wanted to have money for myself. But what I started to do was I would go to...
You're muted again.
Jesus, I'm sorry, Sean. I'm so sorry, man.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
I would go to a local drugstore and I would buy my mother like a coffee mug because she loved coffee, right? She loved that instant coffee. And I would buy my stepdad his favorite candy. Now you say, why are you doing that? I did it since I was in 3rd grade. Ever since I had money to do it, I was trying to buy their acceptance. I thought if I made them happy with candy or a coffee mug or a rug from my mother's kitchen, they would start treating me like a human, right? And hopefully, things would change, but they never did. And, all these years, Sean, all these years, this is going to sound crazy, but I have to say this. I used to dream I could fly, and I would fly from Rockford, Illinois to Dubuque to go see my dad. I would spend every night with him, and I would fly back in the morning just before I had to go to school. I know that sounds nuts and crazy, but that was my reality, man. I missed him that much, right? So, in short order, my stepdad started taking the money from my mother that I was giving my mom for home, for the bills, etc. I quit the paper route. Now, pretty much everything I've shared with you was in the book, but I'm just trying to not go into much detail because, it gets a lot deeper. But anyway.
Yeah, you don't want to give away the whole book.
No. So essentially, I quit the paper route, and my stepfather confronted me, and he asked me why. And I didn't really have an answer, and he pulled his 38 on me and pulled the trigger. And I instantly peed my pants as I ran down the stairs. Obviously, it was Russian roulette. I didn't know that. I'm a little kid. He pulls his beloved gun on me and pulls the trigger. What am I supposed to think? It's a game? He was mad at me for quitting the job. And he began to really single me out even more than he had my whole existence with him. And I mentioned before how he liked to humiliate me in front of his friends. And I mentioned how he loved to watch boxing, as did I. He started this pattern where he would have all my brothers and myself come into his study. He had a big floor console TV. He would sit on a folding chair. I think it was a folding chair. And he used to drink a fifth of brandy a day, right? And he would instruct me to take off my shirt. And I'll be standing in front of him. I don't know what was going to happen. And my brothers would watch, looking on. And he's saying, I'm going to show you boys how you throw a punch. And so he would instruct me to punch him in the chest. My stepdad is 6'5", 350, right? He's a big man. He was like a giant to me, being a little kid. So I attempted to punch him in the chest, and he's like, that's a slap. I'm going to show you how you do it. And he punched me in my chest so hard that I lost my balance, fell back against the TV, busted my head open. And that was just one example of how he liked to humiliate me. And when my head was busted open, I was bleeding all over. Do you think for a second he even cared to check on my welfare? No. That's life, right? So the abuse at the hands of my mother and stepfather never changed either. I mean, when we got in trouble, or when my stepfather was not happy about, when I go to Dubuque, for an example, there is a golden rule in the family, or there was. You never, ever, ever tell people about our business in this house. Never. But guess what? I was so desperate for help, and I was crying out to help, to the school, to my extended family. But guess what? Nobody did anything to help us. And when I would sit at my grandparents' house, and my dad would be there, and they would sit me down and say, so what's going on, Joey? I mean, what's really going on at your house? I'll tell them everything. And then that fateful day would come when I had to take the bus back to Rockford. And when I would get picked up and they took me home, I got beat because I essentially told my family, asking them, the people I love, help. We need help. This man is beating my mother all the time. He beats my sister, my brother, myself. And I said, we're afraid for our lives. But instead of my family and others calling social services or the police. They would call my mom and stepdad on the phone and cuss them out, and they would threaten to blow my stepdad's head off. They would use not so flattering language toward my stepfather, calling him all these derogatory names. And, Dubuque, Iowa was like over 2 hours away from Rockford. And, I remember one time he drove up there in like 40 minutes because they challenged him to meet at the bridge. They were going to kill him. He showed up. But since they didn't show up, what he did was he took out his frustration out on us. The fact that it was my family, the fact that I'm the one that initiated all of this by telling people our business. So, essentially that's basically how it went. So after seventh grade, I got to once again go to Dubuque, Iowa, but my mom pulled me aside and said, "You're not coming back to Rockford. Take all your clothes." Essentially what happened was I get to Dubuque, Iowa, my grandparents' house. My mom calls and says, "I'm leaving your stepdad. I need you to find us an apartment." So here I am, 13, I called like 50 different landlords trying to find a place. And my grandma's like, "No one's going to believe you. You're just a little kid." I'm like, "I have to try." As it turned out, I found us an apartment. My mom moved up there with my siblings, but it was short-lived. She got us evicted. Essentially, we went back to Rockford, back to the monster. And for a day or two, he was treating us really nice. He was even treating my mom really nice. But that was the end of it, right? So, but what happened was his abuse to my mom really, really intensified to the point that about a year and a half from the time we went back, we left him again. But this time we went to a battered women's shelter in Rockford, Illinois, where we stayed for about 2 or 3 months and eventually got in an apartment. And we're finally away from the monster, my stepdad. We're finally away from him. And my mom will start to treat me and my sister the way she used to treat us when we were young kids. She will start to love us again and, just shower us with affection. My dad will come back and we'll be a happy family again. That never happened. In fact, the thing with my mom, her drinking intensified. She started was seeing all these different random guys. Her physical abuse toward me and my sister intensified to the point, Sean. Now listen to this. It was so bad. My two youngest brothers, technically my stepbrothers, lived with us. They didn't live with their father, right? Their father would come and pick them up for visitations once a week, I believe it was. But anyway, things were so bad living with my mother. I asked my stepfather, this person who hated me, this person that beat me if I looked at him the wrong way, this person that kept me locked away, I asked him if I can live with him. Imagine that.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, you know what they say, man, hurt people hurt people. It's a vicious cycle, whether it's physical abuse, mental abuse, sexual abuse, when, if who knows if that was done to them, or sometimes it's just a matter of power, having power over somebody, because
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a matter of having power over somebody because at some point in your life you didn't have power, or somebody had power over you. So, I mean, there's all kinds of different reasons why people do that. But, hey, man, I apologize that happened to you, man. That's got to be. I was never abused in that way, so I have no idea what it would be like. But I imagine it would be horrible, and I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Thank you, bro. I'm gonna tell you something, man. I had to make a decision. So I joined the Navy. I joined 362 days before I could actually go to boot camp. And it was all set up because of my hard work. I was all set up to graduate first semester. I was going to turn 18 January 10th. I was going to graduate the next day. 2 weeks later, I'm going to be in Chicago, Illinois in January, freezing my nuts off. But I was going to be away from the greatest tormentor in my whole life, my own mother. So what happened was she decided to move back to Dubuque, Iowa. And I thought that was cool at first because I'd be closer to my extended family. Maybe dad will be back around. What happened was, Iowa wouldn't accept a lot of my credits. They essentially said, you have to go a full year. And I was already committed to the military. I couldn't do that. Luckily, there was a local high school. It was called an alternative high school, Central. And this is where a lot of the kids that have dropped out or a lot of kids that like to fight and get in trouble, truant kids, would go. So it had a bad reputation. However, this alternative high school realized the work I put in and that my credits from Illinois had value. They were legitimate. So they accepted all my credits. I needed 2 credits to graduate. I took English and sociology. And I'll say this about the school. I absolutely loved it. I was on the honor roll. I took 2 classes, English and sociology. And what I loved about sociology, I learned so much about the Vietnam War and the Vietnam veterans. Just getting ready to go into the military myself, I was really hungry to learn more and more. And I interviewed all these different veterans and had to ask them these really, really tough questions. But the book was published. It went to the White House. It went to all over the place, right? And it was one of my greatest accomplishments. We did that as a team, as a class or whatever. But when I wasn't in school, I went from like 7:30 until 10, I think. I would go up to the YMCA, lift weights, work out, try to get really, really ready for boot camp. And mentally I was ready. So that day finally came. Actually, about a month before it came, my dad was back in the scene, my father. However, he was living in a rescue mission. He was a helpless, hopeless alcoholic. And the only time he would come around is when he was drunk. And I played interference. In other words, I refused to let him be around my 4 kid brothers when he was in that state of mind. You say, why? He was away from his kids for all those years. Well, he don't know his 2 youngest sons because Greg was still in the womb when he left. And Marty, his other son, was just a little infant. The only father they knew was my stepdad. They didn't know their real father. So since we were all subjected to being around my mom and stepdad in a drunken stupor for years, and what they would do as a result, how he would beat her, how he would beat us, I was not going to let my kids be subjected, or my kid brothers, to be subjected to another individual coming into our lives that's not in the right state of mind, that does dumb things. No way. No freaking way. So came over one time, and I came real close to beating the crap out of him because he was so aggressive. But he left. But I was so upset. This was my hero since I was a little boy. I was devastated. I was crushed. So what do? I go to his sister's house, who was one of my favorite aunts. Her name was Grace, and she sat me down, and she is the one that explained to me that my mother had an affair behind his back, and he didn't have the coping skills, and that he literally became a hobo when he left the family. He would actually catch rail cars all over the Midwest. He'd go to Denver, Colorado. He would go to Memphis, Tennessee. He'd go to Milwaukee, Des Moines, Lincoln, Nebraska, Omaha. He would stay in his rescue missions, work, make a little money to get drunk. And he was doing all this because he didn't know how to cope with the fact that his life was destroyed, right? And she shared with me some other details I saw in the book. But listen, Sean, it was at this point that this anger and this resentment and this unforgiveness for my father left. It just left. because I then understood. I got it. And I think my dad was trying to make amends. I think he was trying to make an effort to make up for lost time, but he couldn't do it without the use of alcohol at that point in his life. My point is this, Sean. On that day, I found the ability to forgive my father completely and fully. And it was like a million pounds lifted off my chest. So the day, and I only seen him once after that before I went to boot camp. And we had a really long talk, and we started our relationship that became a beautiful one. So I the day I go into the boot camp, I have to get the city bus down to the Greyhound bus station. I'm waiting for the city bus, and my mom comes out on the front stairs. I remember it's in January in Illinois or Iowa. It's really cold, and she starts screaming from the top of her lungs. And this is the common theme she's always said since I joined the Navy. When I was still in high school, you're never going to make it. You're a piece of shit, just like your father. You're worthless. You're shiftless. And just remember one thing, cocksucker, you can never come back here to live. So that was my send-off. That was my send-off, dude. I get to boot camp. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So that's that crab bucket mentality, man. You know how they try to, when you ever see crabs and they're trying to get out of a bucket and you got the other one trying to keep them, pulling them down?
Absolutely.
She
right,
she just didn't want you to make something of yourself, because then, you know what I mean? How are you going to go and do something and be somebody and leave me here to be nothing?
Exactly. That's exactly right. So, Sean, up until this point, physically, I'm top-notch shape. I memorized my 11 general orders, chain of command, but obviously I'm a 18-year-old kid. I'm nervous about the unknown. I go to boot camp. It was 8 weeks long. And I got to tell you, they could never say or do anything to me worse than what my mother did to me. It was laughable. I'm like, you got to be freaking kidding me. You guys, my mother, all 4'11", was more brutal and more vicious and more vindictive than all you guys combined. And then I had my stepdad to deal with. Boot camp was you know why? It's a mental game. What they do is, obviously it's physical, but they break you down. So if you go to boot camp and you're all snooty and, you're born with a silver spoon in your mouth, you think you're better than everybody else, you think you know it all, they break that down and they rebuild you into the Marine or the sailor they want you to be, right? Well, Sean, I was already broke down. I couldn't be broke down any further. So whatever they attempted to, I followed their orders. I did what they told me. And you know what I'm saying? But they couldn't break me. They couldn't, so a lot of guys couldn't make it in boot camp. They got kicked out or they just quit. But for me, it was like a walk in the park. And you said something before I think I need to elaborate on. So, the crab bucket, pulling people down. Somebody might be listening and they say, well, why didn't all those people in the projects or your neighbors or your family call social services? In the projects, I need to explain something. There was drug dealers, there was gang members, there was prostitutes. My stepdad was the ringleader of all of them, right? There were some really hardcore dudes in the projects. Really hardcore dudes. But they're all afraid of my stepdad. And nobody messed with us. No one messed with the white kids, Tyrone's kids, because they don't want to have to face the wrath of Tyrone. And it's funny because he would always say, yeah, nobody put a hand on y'all. No, nobody put a hand on us but you. Nobody hurt us but you and our mother. So the reason these people were so terrified, they weren't going to call the cops or social services. No freaking way. My stepdad, after we left him, he was trying to get into his mother's apartment, and she was in the apartment watching soap operas or whatever. Those sliding glass doors that, many people have like on their back door. He put his arm through one of those trying to get to his own mother.
Yeah, and a lot of times in situations like that in the projects, man, what you're going through and what was happening in your household was probably happening in quite a few households. It wasn't just, you know what I mean? It's just kind of that type of behavior sort of breeds in those depressed areas, man, because you just got a lot of unhappy people, and they've got to, it's got to come out somewhere.
You are exactly 100% right, Sean. A lot of my friends didn't have a dad or didn't have a mother or a father. They stayed with their grandmother. And a lot of those kids dealt with dysfunction too. But they didn't tell people. It's like unwritten rule. You don't, even your friends, you don't tell them what happens, because if you did, you had hell to pay. So I get through boot camp. I go to school. I get stationed in San Diego. I was in the Persian Gulf, Iraq. I was in Africa twice, the Philippines. So I've been literally around the world. I made 2 Westpacks and end up back in Philadelphia. I get out of the Navy with the honorable discharge. But when I was in the Navy, I need to say this to your audience. I made a promise to my grandfather, my paternal grandfather. He was in the Navy during World War II, so that's why I chose the Navy, because he was my hero, right? I promised my grandparents I wouldn't be the typical sailor, the one who gets drunk, that likes to fight, that womanize. You go to these different countries and you get with all these women prostitutes or whatever. And that's exactly what I became. And I'm going to tell you why. When I got to San Diego, although I found the ability to forgive my father, right? Because I love my mother, I assumed by default I forgave her, right? And my stepfather, I just straight out hated him, all right? So I didn't know how to deal with it, because my whole life I watched how my mom and stepdad dealt with everyday life. The way my stepdad dealt with conflict is with his fists. The way they dealt with paying their bills and being responsible was bouncing checks. The way that they would, just carry on in life was not right, So I found myself, I turned to alcohol. I mean, I had these guys I worked with would go to the beach and, everyone was drinking Budweiser, and I felt like an oddball out, if I didn't. And I discovered by drinking, it took away the pain, because I was in a lot of pain mentally, emotionally, right? And it took it away for that day. And before long, a bad pattern started where I drank a lot. And I like to get into a lot of fights, and they dubbed me Clink Dog. And I mean, I went as far as getting a tattoo on my arm, Bodog. And I mean, I had a reputation to keep up. And, I was just notorious, man, right? So when I get out of the Navy, that pattern continued, because I was still carrying around anger, unforgiveness, resentment toward my mom and stepdad. And I didn't know how to deal with it. But I knew when I drank, I felt better. It took away the pain, took away the tears. But now this is hard to talk about, but I need to talk about it. I'm working on a second book, so I can't, and I won't share a lot of details. But I'll just say that what I'm about to share really happened. And it's only by God's grace I'm at where I'm at today. So my drinking, caused me to lose my house, my job, my car. I ended up homeless. So in 1994, I just lost my job, broke up with a girlfriend. My father, of all people, he's back in our lives again. I mean, he's still drinking, but, our relationship is a much, much better place. He says, why don't you go to Dubuque, Iowa? So I took his advice, and that's where I met my wife. And shortly after that, I became a Christian. And we got married in September of 96. In 98, found out we're going to have my wife's going to have a baby. And then it was at that point in my life that I started having these dreams and nightmares about what I went through as a kid. Now you have to understand, I thought that, by loving my mom, I've released her, but I really didn't. And I know I didn't release my stepdad. In fact, my stepdad got remarried in the fall of 94. His two sons asked me to be in the wedding party. And a lot of my extended family, I'm going to use some graphic language, but this is what they said. How in the hell can you be a part of that nigger's wedding? I'm like, first of all, I'm talking to a nigger. Nigger means ignorant, and you're extremely ignorant. Second of all, for me, those are my two brothers. And they asked me to be in the wedding for them. I'm not doing this for their dad. I'm doing it for them. But selfishly, I thought, thirdly, it'd be closure for me. I can finally have him out of my life. Guess what happened? I didn't find closure. But in 98, when I knew I was going to be a father, and listen, Sean, I never wanted kids because I was so afraid of something called learned behavior.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna. That's what I was gonna. I was gonna ask. I mean, maybe that you're having those nightmares and everything is just because it's not you were afraid that you would be the same kind of father that your stepfather was and your mother was to you. You know what I mean? Exactly. It's like, you did a lot. So when people are abused, whether it's mental, physical, sexual, that's why you see them carrying it out themselves to other victims, because you know what I mean, that you have to be willing to break that cycle and deal with the issues.
Man, Sean, you are so right, man. You are right on point, man. You're an extremely intelligent individual, and you get it. You understand it. And so I mentioned I was a relatively new Christian. And when I say Christian, I mean, that's a loose term. I put my trust in Jesus Christ. I was a born-again believer, and I was on fire for God. And I was struggling. Now, you have to understand. So I became this Christian, and the drinking I was doing, all that, I stopped. My whole life changed. And I give all credit to God. And by the way, Sean, I'm in the 12-step program. I don't know if you are or you're just familiar with them. So the drinking and my stinking thinking, all that dissipated, right? I put myself in treatment, and I got into a solid group, got a sponsor, et cetera, et cetera. And all that was a part of my recovery. Anyway, not an audible voice, but in my heart, my mind, God kept telling me, I have forgiven you. Who are you not to forgive? Now, you have to understand, my mom and dad would come to Dubuque once in a while. They both were still drinking. And in fact, my father lived with my mother. He rented out a bedroom. They were just good friends. They became best friends. And he would pay her so much money a month. He stayed with her for like 7 years. But when my mom would come to town, I would try to roll out the red carpet. I was still trying to buy her acceptance, right? I was still wanting her to like me, but I was never good enough. I was never, ever, ever good enough. And that really, that hurt me. Anyway, God kept saying, I've forgiven you. Let it go. Forgive them. And on one particular day, I made a conscious choice to forgive my mother completely and fully, to forgive and let go of the unforgiveness, resentment, anger, hatred. My stepfather, I let it go. He's no longer in space in my mind. And I'll tell you something, Sean, it set me free, dude. And when my son was born, guess what? My mother took a back seat. My priority is not trying to please my mother, roll out the red carpet. My priority are my kids. And I have 2 sons today, Sean.
That's cool, I get emotional. Congratulations, man.
Thank you. I get emotional when I say this part, though, dude. I get really emotional. I have 2 sons, 19 and 21. And guess what? I've broken that cycle. They don't know what it's like to be in the basement locked up. They don't know what it's like to be abandoned. They don't know what it's like to be beaten to a pulp. They don't know what it's like to be told every day you're worthless, you're garbage. No, I've broken that cycle. And that's my legacy, man. And if I was to die tonight, my dash, for me, that's my greatest legacy is my sons. And even to this day, man, I have a son. The oldest son is a junior at the university. My younger 19-year-old, he works in construction like yourself. They both live at home. It ain't nothing for, every day they'll come up to me and they'll say, they call me Dada. I need a hug, Dada. Love you, Dada. And do you know what that does for me? You know what that does for them? It's huge, man.
That's got to be awesome, man. I totally relate to you, man. And dude, that's awesome that you were able to break that cycle, man, because a lot of people can't.
You're right. A lot of people can't. And this has never been about me. I believe it's about God working in and through me. Am I a perfect father? Absolutely not. I've had my share of struggles, man. But my kids were my priority. They were, I don't know how to describe this any other way. Just, I was really, really like uber to be, I just was obsessed with doing the best I can. Do I have all the answers for my kids when they had questions? No. When my kid would fall off his bike and skin his knee, was I able to fix it? No. But I was able to comfort him and tell him I love him and tell him that everything is going to be all right, son. It's going to be okay. And that's what life is about, man. I need to mention one thing, though, and you hit on this before. You see, my mom, my stepdad, and my father all had extremely traumatic childhoods themselves. However, that did not give them the right to do what they did. That's not an excuse. Everything I went through, so that can be my excuse. I'm going to do to my kids what was done to me. If that would have been me, I wish somebody would have shot me and killed me, because no one should be subjected to that type of abuse. And that's why today I'm an advocate and advisor for ambassador for children. I'm an ambassador for NAASCA. And I want to be that voice for the kids coming up today, because what's going on in the world in which we live, these kids are like a commodity. They're being bought and sold by these people, these pedophiles. These people or these kids are treated like a piece of, like a thing. And I tell you, man, because of all the stuff I suffered as a kid, yeah, I have PTSD, CPTSD, depression, anxiety, but I found coping skills to deal with all those things, right? And my condition has not become my conclusion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect sense.
I mean, and I'm telling you, Sean, and I'm telling everyone, your condition does not have to be your conclusion. I'm going to give you an example. I shared my example. Now let me share one that's maybe more relevant or more people can relate to. I had skin cancer, right? Maybe, Sean, let's just pretend you came down with, I don't know, let's say you had kidney cancer, right? Let's just suppose. First of all, that cancer does not determine who you are. Second of all, you're still sucking air. So you survived it, right? You got through the cancer. That cancer did not become your conclusion. I don't know if that's making sense, but
yeah, it makes absolute sense. I mean, I went to prison. I did all these, things, and my situation may be something that I've went through, but it doesn't have anything to do with who I am. It may have shaped my character to a certain extent, but it didn't have anything to do with the person that I am today. My choices and who I choose to be determines and who I am as a person, not the situations and the experiences that I've been through. They help to shape.
That's awesome.
They help to shape a little bit of that. But I mean, it's, the reason why I am who I am today, and I imagine why you are who you are today, is you've taken a look inside of you as a person, and the things that didn't work for you or don't work for you, or that you didn't want to be, or carry out, you've actively worked on that. But you have to you have to know what you don't want to be in order to become who you want to be.
Exactly. You know what, Sean? I volunteered. I've worked with kids since I was 11th grade in high school, right? And presently, I volunteer at the Y. I help coach basketball. This is what I want to say to all you listeners, men and women alike. Listen, man, this is the reality of everything. There are so many people who have experienced what I experienced, but much, much worse. These young boys and girls that are being brought up in a situation where, it's so bad, so awful. And they have no role models, no male role models or female role models, but in this case, male. And what happens is the cycle continues. And the Black culture is called the slave mentality, right? And so these kids carry on the traditions or of the cycle of abuse, of alcoholism, drug abuse, because that's what they saw their mom and dad do. That's what they know. I want to challenge you, Sean, and everyone who's listening. And maybe you guys are already doing this. I don't know. And if you are, thank you. An hour a month of your time. I'm big on the kids, right? But even if you want to go to the adults, like to a rescue mission, donate an hour a month of your time. Because you never know how much that impacts people. It can make a difference in people's lives. Because, listen, I hear people bitleaking all the time about these young kids feeling so entitled and feeling so this and so that. What are you doing to make a difference? Now, you may say, well, I don't have kids, or I'm busy with my own kids. Well, that's even better. Focus on your own kids. It needs to start at home, right? Your kids need to be taught these core values, this moral compass that we all have before they go into the real world. Not to lie, not to steal, to not cheat and try to get over on people. All these types of things. You know what I'm trying to get across, right, Sean?
Yeah, for sure. You have to start at home. You have to raise children that you'd want to deal with as adults yourself. You know what I mean? So the kind of an adult that I want to deal with as an adult, that's the kind of child that I need to be raising to be that kind of an adult.
Yes, sir.
That's right. It all starts at home, man. But, we've got, there's so many things that are working against regular, average, everyday working class people. Whether it's the kind of media that is being, whether it's like the Jay-Z's and Beyonce's and whatever culture, rap culture stuff that's out there that our kids or that children are watching or young adults are watching, that are being, kind of programmed on how to treat women. You see the Cardi B's and, all these like Kardashians and you know what I mean? You've got all these media and influencers that are out there that are teaching our kids and adolescents of kind of not what, I don't want my daughter growing up looking at that kind of stuff and thinking that, it's okay. You watch the Kardashians and you've got, they're with unavailable men. Guys that are cheating on them and they just keep going back to them or going to other ones. And they're putting that out publicly. And it's like, it's almost like it's making it okay for, oh yeah, if your man cheats on you, it's all good. Don't worry. Just find another one. Or, go ahead and choose emotionally unavailable men. It's all good.
Sean, and since you're speaking on that show, you remember that show 16 and Pregnant?
Yeah, I remember that.
I mean, I remember when I first came out how shocking that was. And I'm like, now it's like, no biggie. I remember the first Persian Gulf War. If you follow that, seeing some of the footage, I was in the military for 6 years altogether, right? I saw some awful things. I saw people lose their lives, whatever. But when you see it on TV and it's kind of like in your face, there's that kind of a shock factor at first. But when you get inundated with it every day, you become numb to it.
Yeah, it just normalizes it.
Exactly. And with that template, that's what's happened. And you're exactly, man, you are so right.
They're normalizing bad behavior.
Exactly right.
And it's not, and you have, as a parent, you have to know that, recognize it, don't be lazy, and don't let your kids watch that kind of shit, and,
you're right.
And, teach them things that, and there's a lot of things in the schools that they're not being taught, the real truth about our history and things that have gone on, that, I thought there was this one meme that I saw and it said, instead of giving your child the life that you wish you would have had, teach your child the things that you wish you would have known.
Wow.
Like all of the information that you've realized, in your life, whether it's, the media and the corporatists and politicians are all in bed with each other. Teach them about that, how to distinguish, bullshit from fact, how to navigate in this new media culture that we live in, where you're being fed misinformation, disinformation. You have no idea what's true and what's not true.
You're exactly right, man. It's like, who do you believe? Like with this whole political thing going on, it's like, really? I mean, a few weeks ago, you hear this and you hear that, and it's like, it's just insane, man. It really is.
Well, the bottom line is you have to really pay attention to what's happening. All right. So you've got the DNC trying to push Biden on everybody. Nobody wants Bernie because they're calling him a socialist, but okay, he's not a socialist. He's a democratic socialist, which is a little bit different from a socialist. I think people, when they say socialist, they think a communist. And we have 3 people in the race still, but you don't hear about the third one, who is Tulsi Gabbard, who's actually calling out the military industrial complex and the regime change wars and everything that these corporatists are in bed doing. The military industrial complex, or congressional military industrial complex, if you really want to call them, they're the ones that are giving all these politicians all of this money, funneling cash into their elections, their re-elections, the people that want to play ball with them. And Tulsi Gabbard, who is actually a 2-tour Iraq veteran, is calling it out, saying, hey man, these regime change wars are bullshit. We're spending millions, billions of dollars, of taxpayer money are going to these, Lockheed Martin, all of these other, corporate entities that are funding these people to get reelected, because they're all just, voting, to go into these places. Like, we just tried to have one with Iran, but Iran was all right, well, we're not fucking with you. But Iraq is a perfect example. We go in and it's just so these military vendors can keep making money on weapons and tanks and jets and ammunition and all of this stuff. And it's ridiculous. Yep. when we have huge problems at home. I mean, look at this new virus that's coming out right now, or that's out right now. We are incapable of handling an outbreak of the type that is threatening to be right now. We're not capable of handling it.
That's insane, man. It's like, and I agree with you, it's insane because, you know, they like to say we're the world leader in this and world leader in that, and we're the freest nation in the world. Let me just tell you this real quick. So 3 or 4 years ago, there was a group of Chinese scholars from Wuhan, China, that were here. They were studying. Long story short, I became good friends with them. They went back to Wuhan. And as you know, they've been under quarantine for like 6, 7, 8 weeks. And they've been sharing with me, you know, what they've done as a people and as a country. And even when they were here in China or here in the States, you know, thinking China is a communist country, they don't have the same freedoms we have, this and that. I learned a lot, man, that don't believe everything you hear. Yeah, it is a communist country, but it isn't exactly what the press tells us or what the media wants us to know about China. For an example, and my eyes have been opened a little bit. I mean, China, you know, they are forcing these people, like in Wuhan, there's like 16 million people to stay in their homes or whatever, and they have the resources to turn these factories into hospitals, like within not months, but days, you know. I was just seeing the video that they sent me. It's amazing, man. Anyway,
you kind of got to think of the timing of this whole thing. All right. So you've got Hong Kong, you know, that whole deal that's happening over there where they're about to go from colonial law to, you know, China's going to take them back, or China's going to, I don't know the whole thing, but I know there's tons of protesting that was happening going on there. China's protesting. All right. You've got the population in China, which is out of control. You've got population all over the world, which is out of control because what used to control the population was wars. And we don't have a whole lot of wars anymore, at least not on the American part where there's a lot of American casualties. So you've got the United States whose population is growing rapidly, and, you know, flu takes out some, DUIs take out, you know, there's, you know, it thins out a little bit, but, you know, and then you also have, Trump, you know, who's, you know, his whole platform was, you know, the economy. Well, this thing gets released. Now the market starts tanking. If we go into a recession, guess what's going to happen for him? Oh, well, look at what happened on your watch, and they're already attacking him. I'm no Trump supporter by any means because he doesn't support labor at all. And none of these people support the working class. They all despise the working class. Every single one of them, the right, the left, all the corporatists, they hate the working class. All right. So everything that they do is devised to keep the working class down. They don't want us to rise up. Tulsi Gabbard and even Bernie Sanders, you know, he's talking about, you know, rights for the working class and, you know, healthcare for everybody, which every country out there has healthcare, you know, free healthcare. You know, they talk about free market and capitalism, dude. There's no free market here. When you have a government that is giving bailouts to all of these, you know, failing companies when something bad happens, that is not free market. Free market means you let the ones fail that fail, and then other ones come up behind it.
Yep.
We live in a matrix, all right? And that's when you see the movie The Matrix, that's very real. That's really what it is, man. We're not free. We're being programmed. We have a media that tries to divide us and, you know, keeps us, you know, seeing only what they want us to see. That's why they blacked out Tulsi Gabbard, because she's talking the truth, and they don't want the public to hear that.
Yeah, and I like Tulsi Gabbard because she is telling the truth.
You know, and it's a shame.
You know, in my opinion, you know, I like her a lot.
But, you know, we'll see what happens. You know, we're at about an hour and 13, Joe.
Hey, Sean, man, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm glad that you thought of me, you know, to do this. And, One thing I didn't talk about, the reason I wrote the book or the way it came about, I was journaling stuff, right? Because as a new father, I was still struggling with some things. And I discovered by writing stuff down, pen to paper, it was kind of therapeutic. And my wife said, she's probably read 1,000 books. She goes, you should really write a book. It can help people. She's a mental health nurse. And she come to know all the stories that, I shared with you. And that was my motivation, that if it helps one person to book, I forgot to tell people how they can find the book.
Yeah, you can do all that. I'm going to have you share your social media and anywhere they can find you, where they can find your book at.
Okay.
And then also you can send me links to everything and through an email, and I'll throw that in the show notes as well.
All right. So I'm going to mention that now.
Yeah, go ahead.
They can find. Okay. Yeah. So thank you for this time, Sean. It was an honor and a privilege. I know you're busy, and it means a lot to me that you took the time out. I do have a Facebook page for those that are interested, Joe Potosi. If you go on that page, I'd love to have you come on. If you scroll down, you can see excerpts of my book, etc. There's a lot of links to different podcasts I've done, things of that nature. If you're looking to buy the book, to purchase the book, you can get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Zulon Press. Also, I do have an Instagram page, Joe Potosi, as well as Twitter. So there's a few different ways to reach me. And I guess it's not helpful now, but I do have a website that's on the verge of being done. I can send that to you later, Sean. But anyway, yeah.
Oh, I lost you there, buddy. You there? All right. Well, it looks like I lost Joe there. It's a spotty internet connection. I was trying to get him back, but I haven't been able to. So, just want to thank Joe for coming on the show and sharing his story and his truth with us. Like I said, you can reach him through all his social media handles. I'll be having all that stuff on the show notes as well. So, anyways, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye. Thank you for listening to the show, and thank you, Joe, for being a guest. Appreciate your honesty and your transparency. It's definitely something that's needed out there. Authenticity is going a lot further these days than a lot of the I don't know what you want to call it, the insincerity, lack of transparency in society and the media and the stuff that we have to deal with that's being thrown at us every day. If you're on social media like Facebook or I don't know, Instagram's got it's kind of its own thing. But there's just constant, we're being bombarded with, coronavirus, this, that. I mean, it's like, no, you can't turn anywhere without hearing about it. I mean, I want to be up to date, but I had to tune out of all that and, try and focus on some of the things that, are important to me and reflecting we're being isolated, and I think I think the important thing is not to waste the time. Don't waste the time that you've been given to do whatever it is you need to do. Whether it's work on yourself, you've got some character defects that you're wanting to address. It's a good time to start looking at that. If you have got children and you need to read to them more, or there's something that you're lacking in that department that you could be doing better on, it's a good time for that too. Anything that you feel as a person, because we all have these thoughts in our head, like, damn, you know what, I could be doing better at that. I could be, whatever it is, you name it, more helpful, around the house, with my wife. Does she need something? For myself, it's, I procrastinate. So, hey, maybe we don't push this off another day, and let's just get it done. That's something I struggle with. But there's something that we could be doing, besides just laying around stressing over something that we're not going to be able to change. I know we all have bills. The future is there's, I'm not saying it's bleak, but it just, there's no, I think the fear that I was talking about last night in one of these episodes that I'm going to release next was, it's not fear of the virus itself. It's just fear of the uncertainty of what's coming. How long are we going to be on this shelter in place? Is it going to last more than the 3 weeks? What if it goes into like 2 months? Luckily I'm okay financially for at least a month, but it's just uncertain. Like, what's next? And don't even get involved with the political shit that's going on. That's a whole nother thing to be stressed about. And then we got the economy tanking. There's just 3 major things that are happening all at one time. And it's just, none of us has ever been here before, ever. So it's just kind of a trip watching it all play out. And just sort of being in my little, 38-foot fifth wheel, tiny living, and just sort of like sitting here going, holy shit. Is this really gonna happen? Is there gonna be other crazy shit that follows this? Mass hysteria, civil war. Like, all these crazy things start going through my head, man. And, it's overwhelming. But, I guess whatever's going to happen is going to happen. All I can do is, try to do my part to help the best that I can and not add to the mass hysteria and the hoarding of groceries and paper products and all of that. So I don't know if you're out there and you're kind of doing the same thing, congrats, kudos to you. It's not easy. And, we'll get through this, one way or another. That's, for sure. Hopefully it's in a lot better situation than we went in with. Maybe this is teaching people that, hey, look, you kind of need to rely on each other. Don't be so distant from one another. If you've got a neighbor, maybe it's a good time after this is all over that you haven't met before to go introduce yourself. Hey, I'm your neighbor. I've been living next to you for 8 years and have no idea who you are. That's where we were at. before this, and hopefully it won't be like that after this. Anyways, that's all I got until the next one, which will be in a couple days. Keep it 100. Stay true to yourself, and everything else is just noise.